The horrendous tale of the SV Charlwood is one of any number of similar tragedies that happened in the seas around the United Kingdom before the advent of modern electronics and navigation systems. These stories are now almost completely forgotten, but as divers we're extremely privileged that we could go and visit the sites of these awful events and get a feel for what happened, and something that I'm really keen is that we keep the stories alive so that people do remember them and the people who died are not completely forgotten. So in this video we're going to be talking about how poor seamanship and incompetence led to the loss of 15 lives on a bright, clear October morning in 1891. Amongst the dead were all the officers of the Charlwood, the captain's wife, one of his young children, and even the children's governess. During the dive, you're going to see me looking at all sorts of objects, as this wreck is absolutely full of bits and pieces. Not only the cargo, which is almost entirely glass, but also a whole load of everyday objects, including something that I find particularly poignant, which is the lid of a casserole dish. But there's also a whole load of everyday objects, including boxes of candles, a sink, and even something that looks possibly like rolls of lead. Anyway, that's all to come later on in the video. So this is Dom Robinson and welcome to my Deep Wreck Diver channel. Just before I start, I get loads of questions about my kit. You know, what torch am I using? Where do I get my gloves? All those kind of things. So what I've started doing is, if you have a look in the description, you will see I've put the details of everything there. So hopefully that will pick up a load of people's questions. Right, on with the dive. So this is Red Alert, which is one of the boats that we use out of Plymouth, operated by Danny Daniels, who's a great bloke. I've known him for years and years, done loads of diving with him. And this dive is from April 2024. So relatively early in the diving season, but you can see actually conditions are pretty awesome. Now the thing about the Charlwood is it's quite close to Plymouth. It's only about 13 maybe miles out of the harbour, and it's also, that makes it quite accessible. It's also not massively deep. It's about 60 metres, so it's a really nice dive to kind of kick your season off with. And I'm not going to use the term shakeout dive, but it's certainly an early season dive, so you can just make sure you've got everything sorted. So anyone who's watched any of my other videos will probably have a pretty good idea of what's coming. So one thing that's unusual about this one though, not diving with Rick. This is a guy called Andy. I taught him to do his kind of deeper diving, and therefore obviously he's a fantastic diver. There he is, just above me. He's having a look at me. I've had a quick look at him, so we've made sure that we're all okay, not streams of bubbles coming out or anything like that. And we're heading down. So probably a good time to talk a bit about the Charlwood. And there's a picture of it. I mean, to me that looks like a beautiful, beautiful ship. In the terminology of the time, it was described as a barque. It was an iron-hulled sailing ship. It was about 60 metres long by 10 metres wide, had 3 masts and about 867 tons. Built in Sunderland in 1877, and as we've already heard, it was sunk very sadly in 1891 off the Edison Lighthouse, while actually en route from Antwerp to Chile, of all places. It was described as having a general cargo, though as you'll soon see, general cargo seems to have consisted mainly of glass, but with a few other interesting bits and pieces. And one of the great things about this wreck is because it is absolutely full of glass, the glass has kept the wreck intact. So this was an iron-hulled sailing ship. There is nothing structurally significant inside it to keep it together, other than that cargo of glass has kept it. And one of the famous ways it's described around here is as a skip full of glass. Now that's a bit harsh, because it is actually, if you look around you can see the beautiful features of the wreck, but it does look a lot like a steel box full of glass. Now what's happening on the dive here, well, you can see there's Andy. He's coming down and he's got the lazy shot. For some reason he's not done what we normally do, which is attach the clip at the top and then drop it down the rope. In fact, he's swam down with it. So I'm helping him out there. You can see I'm sorting him out. We're getting the lazy shot on. It's got a few kilo weight on there, so we can just let it run down to its maximum depth. You can see there's a couple of tags on there already. Those are the first pair of divers who've gone in the water. So we're the second pair on this dive. It's fairly standard, that procedure. First pair of divers go down, make sure the shot is secured into the wreck. Second pair of divers bring the lazy shot in. Doesn't always happen that way, but it's fairly standard on most of the Plymouth boats. So the other thing you can probably see is that there's quite a lot of plankton in the water. You can see what we describe as snot for fairly obvious reasons. Now it's starting to grow at this moment in time. This is April, and what normally happens is the plankton will grow through April, and then by the time you get to May, it's so big that it will have really reduced visibility. Then the plankton dies and falls to the bottom, and the visibility returns. Doesn't always happen in May, but it happens so often that this is known as May water. So if you're planning a trip to Plymouth, I guess the standard advice is to kind of avoid May. Although, having said that, sometimes it can be brilliant. It is a bit hit and miss, and it seems to have been not quite as regular in recent years as it has been in previous ones. Anyway, so what are we doing here? You can see the prusik was left on the shot, probably from the previous day's diving actually. So I'm just pulling it down to about 35 meters, which is the length of the lazy shot. You can see there, I'm taking off the quick release clip. I'm going to attach it onto the prusik, and that will just make sure it stays at 35 meters even when the current picks up. Whilst I'm doing that, Andy has put his tag on, and very shortly I'm going to take my tag off and I'm going to put my tag on as well. Just need to do a bit of mucking around first of all. There it goes. That's my tag. So we now have 4 tags on the lazy shot, and the other divers, as they come down, they're going to put their tags on as well. Confirm with Andy he's okay, and we're off to the bottom. One of the really interesting things about the Charlwood sinking is that the full Department of Trade or the Board of Trade report is available, and you can download it and you can have a read about it. And as you would expect, it gives a huge amount of detail into the sinking of the Charlwood, the circumstances around it, what happened afterwards, and indeed, the board actually reports its findings, which fundamentally come down to the fact this was the fault of the ship that hit the Charlwood. It was a steamship called the Boston, and specifically they blame the second officer on the Boston, a gentleman called Charles Henry Gale. And on the back of the report, he had his licence suspended for 6 months. It also made a number of other recommendations and observations, and actually it's just a really interesting thing to read. So through this dive, I'm going to be talking about things from within that report. I'm going to be highlighting particular things that happened and how, as I've said already, the whole thing was just an utter tragedy and completely avoidable. But if you want to read it yourself, I'll put the link in the description and you can go and do that. Meanwhile, on the dive, you can see that we've got to the bottom of the shot. You can see the divers in front of us have left their strobes, and you can see here that I'm getting my strobe out, and I'm going to be putting my strobe on the lazy shot. So, and then you can also see down there, you can see the wreck as well. Andy's there with me, he's putting his strobe on as well. So you can see that it's pretty dark at the bottom here. There isn't particularly very much ambient light at the moment, which is a bit disappointing because you can get really good conditions on this wreck. And I've dived it on other days. I mean, I've dived this wreck about five or six times, possibly even more actually. And on occasion, you can get light penetration all the way down here. And obviously that just makes it particularly special. Not the case today, but there you go. Anyway, so here we are onto the wreck, and you can see that the shot is bang on the middle of the wreck. And instantly I'm looking down and I'm starting to see glassings. Oh, that looks like a bit of a mast off to my right-hand side. But down here you can see there's bottles and there's panes of glass and all sorts of other bits and pieces, which Charlwood is absolutely famous for. This is why it's called the glass wreck. And this is why, one of the reasons it's so popular, because of course everybody likes to come down here, and it's basically like almost like a shopping session. You can go down and you go, oh, I want 2 glasses of this size or 2 glasses of that size, and you can go and find them in there, and people do have nice little sets. The slight downside is that the glass isn't particularly high quality. It's also been underwater for a very long time as well. So the salt gets into the glass, and no matter how long you leave it in fresh water, it doesn't come out again. And if you have a look at my photos, you'll see lots of all the glass really has got salt inside the glass. I don't know how that works, but that is exactly what happens, and it makes the glasses not as nice as they would be otherwise, and the decanters and all those kind of things. So Andy and me had agreed that we were going to go to the bow first, and you probably saw us doing some hand signals there, or certainly me doing some hand signals saying which way it was to the bow. I've dived this sufficiently so that I know where I am on the wreck. Now, we're following up on the port side. We've just dropped onto the seabed, and this is something I quite like to do, especially if it's a wreck that I've done quite a few times before. I find just being off the side of the wreck, you sometimes spot things that you might miss or that people wouldn't normally see, because most people tend to stay on top of the wreck. One thing I would flag up is that you can see it's quite dark down here, and even my torch isn't lighting up much of the video. Later on in the video, I put on my video lights for my camera, so if you have a look in the description, you will see a way of skipping forward to that bit. So if you want to see a bit of this dive better illuminated, please do that and crack on to that bit. For those of you who want to stay with me, I'm afraid it's going to be like this for a little bit longer. But this is me making my way to the bow, and you've probably just seen a bollard off to my left-hand side. And very shortly, I'm going to come up to the bowsprit as well. So this was a sailing ship, obviously, and therefore there's no engines, no boilers, nothing like that, which makes it relatively unusual, and because of that, quite different. Oh, I've just gone past the bowsprit on my left-hand side. Don't know why there it is. I'm just sort of focusing. In fact, I'm trying to bring Andy over so Andy can have a look at it. Lots of people miss this. They don't realise necessarily what it is, but once you've clocked it, it is fairly obvious. That's me saying this is the bow, this is where we are. I think I may have mentioned this to Andy before we went down and said that, look, once we saw it, I would bring it to his attention so that he could really clearly see what it is. Obviously, that's a fairly solid lump of the ship, unlike, hull panels, hull plates rather, and things like that. So it's a good marker, and it means it's really clear that we're right at the front, right at the bow. Now, in front of me here, you can see more of these kind of panes of glass, and there are thousands of these panes of glass. One of the particular problems with the Charlwood is you've got to be really careful where you put your hands, especially if you're wearing dry gloves like me. So I know any number of people who've punctured their dry gloves on the Charlwood while they're trying to get bits and pieces out. So you do have to be careful, and sometimes people just like to put their hands flat on the ground. Not only do you obviously run the risk of puncturing your gloves, but also you can actually potentially seriously injure yourself. Now, the other thing about the bow is it's one of the places where people know that the decanters are, and also the decanters are in two bits. There's not only the decanter, but there's the stopper for the decanter. Quite a lot of people have got decanters, not many people have got decanters and stoppers. So if you find a stopper, you're doing really well. Now, I think this is what I'm doing here. I'm clearly having a look around. There's just a mass of stuff here. Most of the decanters are broken. Most of the intact ones have been got. But as you can see there's loads of other things. Loads of goblets, loads of small wine glasses, tons and tons of bottles. So it's literally, as I say, it's like a shopping thing. And there you go. That's incredible. I have just reached in and pulled out a stopper. So well done me. That doesn't happen very often. I do have a decanter off the Charlwood. I've got a decanter with a stopper. Interestingly enough, I didn't find my stopper, so somebody else on the dive found a stopper. I think it was Fran, and gave it to me. Fran's obviously been in quite a few of my other dives. She's awesome and is particularly good at finding small stuff like that, like stoppers. But anyway, I've got one. I'm particularly pleased with myself, and what I'm going to do try now is find a decanter. I don't think on this dive I'm successful. Maybe somebody else does, and I think I give them the stopper because that's the right thing to do. So I'm here on the starboard side of the wreck now and heading towards the stern, and I know from a previous dive that somewhere down here is a really interesting kind of copper object. I've no idea what it is, so I'm going to come across it in a little bit, but in the meantime you can just see even more of these bottles and cargo and stuff that has fallen out of the wreck onto the seabed. There's just a whole load of it. Now this object is really, I'm really close. In fact, there it is, brilliant. I knew I was getting close to it. I'd love to know what this thing is here. It's essentially a large copper box. It's kind of, as you can see there, it's rotted away partly. There's a conger eel or some sort of fish perhaps, maybe living inside it. I have no idea what that thing is, but would love to know. So if anybody's got any ideas on that, please stick it in the comments. I would be really interested to hear. Meanwhile, you can see the hull is up on the right hand side. This particular part of the wreck, it's quite high. So loads of nice things have come off the Charlwood over the years, and a few years ago this came up for auction, which is clearly the bell. We have no idea who found it, we have no idea when it was found, but this wreck has been dived for a long time. The location's been known for ages. So somebody at some point was fortunate enough to get the bell. Like a load of people, I bid for it in the auction, unfortunately wasn't successful. Another lovely thing that's come off the wreck is this, which is stunning, and you would imagine is one of a pair. Now I do know the guy who's got that, and I've seen some other photos of it since it's been cleaned up, and it is absolutely wonderful. But that one there is off wreck site, and he found that just off the side of the wreck with the arm sticking out. So that's one of the reasons that I do what I do, and I'm always optimistic that at some point I'm going to find the matching twin of that one, which would be a lovely thing. So on to what happened to the Charlwood. How did it sink? Well, it was a really common event at this period of time in that it collided with the Boston, the SS Boston that I've mentioned already. And the simple reason is these two vessels were going in opposite directions at night, and the Boston simply wasn't paying good enough attention. And despite the best efforts of everybody on board both vessels, they realised too late that there was going to be a collision, and the Boston hit the Charlwood on the starboard side and, according to the Board of Trade report, inflicted serious damage. They tried to get everybody on the Charlwood, but particularly the women and children, onto the boats that the Charlwood had. It had one lifeboat, and they were in the process of getting everybody on board when all of a sudden the ship foundered and everybody was thrown into the water. The Boston, which had drifted off, had serious problems of its own, but had deployed its boat to come to the assistance of the Charlwood. Unfortunately, by the time it got there, and despite the fact they spent some sort of 2 hours rowing around looking for people, they only managed to save 5 people from the Charlwood. Another 2 people were saved by another vessel, but very, very sadly, the people lost, as I've already mentioned, included all the officers, the captain's wife, one of his young children, and the children's governess. So it's really sad. And if you think about it, you know, as I'm looking around the ship here, you can see I've just found a sink there. That's what that is. It's kind of stuck in, but you can see it's porcelain. You can see the bit that the water comes out of in the bottom. And whenever I see artefacts like this on the Charlwood, and you're going to see a few more in a minute, you think, who were those used by? What were the last people to use them? And you think about this. The captain had his entire family on board. He had his wife, he had his 2 young children, there was a governess for them. So you can see at some part of this ship there would have been probably a bedroom for the children, there would have been the area they played in, there was the area maybe where they studied with the governess and all those kind of things. Lots of the kind of crockery, you can see a bit of crockery there. You know, there's, in fact, there you can just see my torches on the lid of the casserole dish, and I'm just going to pull it out in a second. But these were things that probably that family would have used on a daily basis to eat their dinner. And oh, sorry, that's not the casserole dish. I think maybe that's it there. Yeah. So I'm just about to pull it out now. There you go. There's a casserole dish. So the family dinner, presumably they would have had their food served in that casserole dish. They would have eaten from it, presumably around a table together. And it's just really sad. You know, I have a family of my own. We have objects like this that are part of our family rituals. I just find it really, really sad to see those kind of objects and see and think of, you know, what was lost from those from that family. And one of the children, I think it was a son. He survived the sinking, but then, you know, what happened to him after that? You know, his name's not given in the report. You know, there's no way really probably of finding out what happened to him afterwards. Did he have other relatives who took him in? Did he have to go to an orphanage? You know, I don't know. But one thing's absolutely guaranteed, that child's life would have been transformed by the events that happened that day and that resulted in the Charlwood ending up where it is now. And of course, there's a whole load of people would have been impacted by the effect of the Charlwood sinking as well. All those sailors who lost their lives on board this vessel, they presumably would have had wives or families or whatever. And then all of a sudden, they've lost their income, they've lost the breadwinner in the house. you know, what happened to those people as well? You know, there was no social security, there was no safety nets in this day. So this one kind of small tragedy would have had a ripple that would have been far wider than just the people who died on the wreck. So it's kind of, I just, whenever I dive something like this, where people have lost their lives, I always think about those kind of things. And it's one of the reasons, I guess, I'm quite keen to tell the story. So hopefully this tragedy isn't forgotten. People watch my videos, people learn about it, and when people go and dive this wreck, as I'm sure many other people will do, that when they're down there and maybe they see that casserole dish or they see some of the other bits and pieces that I'm going to show you in a second, they think also about the people who were the last ones to use those objects and what happened on that day in 1891. Anyway, you might think that's all a bit maudlin, so if you do, apologies for that. But anyway, back on with the dive. So I'm here in the stern area, really, and this is probably the most broken down bit of the wreck. One of the things with the Charlwood is there's no rudder or anything like that I've ever found, although it does look as though I might have just, that's a porthole there. So you can see there's a porthole buried under that bit of plate, and I think it's going to stay under there. I may try and get it out, but it's going to, frankly, I can do without a porthole, but it would be, I guess, nice to get it out so other people could see it. But as you can see, there's been other divers in and around this area of the wreck, so the viz has been kicked up. Okay, here I am. I'm trying to lift those things out of the way. Presumably this is why the porthole is still here, because it is quite well wedged under whatever, those bits of iron or whatever. So having a good look round. I do like a bit of a challenge. But as you can see, the instant you try and do anything like this on a wreck like this, you just destroy the visibility. And there you go. Waving my hand around is good because it clears stuff out the way. It's bad because obviously it destroys the visibility. You can see I'm still holding on to that stopper for grim death. Clearly I don't want to lose that. Maybe I should have put it in my pocket or something, but I think I was probably a bit concerned that it might fall out and therefore I would lose it. So clearly I'm a bit concerned that the visibility is too good. So flapping my arms around will definitely solve that problem. No, seriously, I'm trying to figure out if that porthole will come out from underneath the plate, and it looks pretty wedged in there, doesn't it? So I think it's going to remain there. If anybody wants a porthole, there's one on the Charlwood. It's somewhere in the stern. You're going to need to go down prepared to put in some serious graft to get that out, and then you'll end up with probably a fairly manky 19th century porthole off a sailing ship. So there you go. That's yours if you want to go find it. Me, I've given up and I'm going back on with the dive. There's far more interesting things on the Charlwood than an old porthole. You can see there, once again, just tons and tons of bottles and glasses. I have no idea why they needed so many of these things in Chile. Perhaps the bottles they were going to fill them up with wine and then bring them back. I don't know. I don't know why they needed so many glasses though, because and this ship is absolutely chock-a-block with glasses. Maybe this period in time Chile was growing, expanding. Maybe they couldn't make their own glass. I don't know, but certainly the Charlwood was carrying a whole heap of it, and there's still tons down, even after loads and loads of divers over the years have been down helping themselves to bits and pieces as well. So the good news is you don't have too long to wait, because with me on this dive I've got my camera, and with my camera I've got my video lights. I am going to turn those on in a bit, and once I turn those on, all of a sudden it will make the picture much better. Rather than being this really dark thing that we've got at the moment, you're going to see far more light. I know these are the rolls of stuff. I have no idea what these rolls actually are. They look a bit like lead. I don't know whether that's the case or not. I've never tried to lift one up. As far as I'm aware, nobody's ever lifted one to the surface, but they do look like lead. I don't know what else they could be, but it does look like some sort of metallic stuff that's been rolled up, and lead would seem like a reasonable option for that. I don't know if there's any experts out there in the transportation of lead in the late 19th century. I would be really interested in your views. If somebody else knows what possibly they could have been carrying in the Charlwood, I'd be really interested as well. So there's my camera. I'm going to realise that taking photos in the dark is not the best thing, and you can see me reaching up there and boom, isn't that lovely? The instant I turn on my video lights, the picture is just so much nicer. And people often say to me, why don't you take your video lights down all the time? Why don't you have these on all the time? And the answer is, of course, is that these videos that I'm showing to you now were not designed for showing to people. They were merely my own record of the dive. So I would wear it and I would review the dive afterwards and try and, think about things or see if I could do things differently. It's only when I realised that other people might be interested and I started putting them on YouTube that I started realising that I should probably take better quality videos. I should think far more about the lighting so that, they're just better quality videos. But yeah, so as you can see, whatever those rolls of stuff are, there's quite a lot of them. This is the stern of the vessel, which I always feel is the most interesting bit because it's got the various different types of cargo. It's got the living quarters that we've just seen, which is where the casserole dish and the porthole was. And it's got these rolls, whatever they are. And then just coming into view, we're going to start to see all the boxes of candles. And the boxes of candles, I think, are really interesting. So why was the Charlwood carrying candles? Well, I guess it must have been carrying candles for itself in the sense of, you need light at night. So, maybe they were carrying them for that. But potentially it was cargo as well. Oh, there's Andy. I've decided to take some photos of him. And probably the more astute of you will have noticed that Andy wears yellow gloves, just like me. I don't know whether he copied me or not, but I'm really glad that he does because it always makes it really easy to see what he's doing with his hands. Now you see there that I've indicated to him, before we went down, I told Andy that we'd be going to see the candles and the bowspirit and various other bits and pieces. So that's me just making sure he's seen them. Now the candles, these boxes have actually only been uncovered in relatively recent years. And you can see as more people have been on them, they're wooden, people have opened up the wooden boxes and had a look out inside. And some people have taken the candles up and done various bits and pieces with them. I'll be honest, I've got no particular interest in candles other than the fact I think they look really interesting on this wreck. It's not something that you see very often. And once again, for me, it's that linkage between the people who were on the ship and the objects that are left on the ship. You can see there's the boxes, there's almost like 4 small boxes in a bigger box, and maybe those were stacked 2 or 3 layers deep, I don't know. There's also a bit of brass or copper things there, and then obviously it's all surrounded by glass. The panes of glass, the glass cups, the glasses, all the other bits and pieces. So it's an incredible part of the wreck. I really love the stern, and you can just see how many boxes of candles there are. I mean, I don't know how long it would take a sailing ship to go from Antwerp to Chile and how many candles they would use per day. I guess if you did know that, you could figure out whether they are there for the crew and for the journey or whether it is some form of cargo. But there's a lot of candles anyway. The other thing you can see just up here, just kind of to the left, I think is the outline of a hatch. So presumably this would have been the entrance. There you go, kind of a hatch cover, entranceway. I think there, maybe an edge of the cargo hold. And that's me just taking a photo of it. And you might have seen that photo at the beginning of the dive. So one of the really nice things about the Charlwood, other than the fact there's tons to see and the fact it's not very far out of Plymouth, is the fact that the depth, as you can see here, 58 metres, that is a really nice depth because it means you're going to get a whole load of bottom time. And with a whole load of bottom time means that you can spend the time doing what I'm doing here, which is just taking it really slowly around the wreck, taking the time to get some reasonably nice photos of both of the wreck, but also my buddy. So got another one there of Andy. Hopefully he'll be pleased with that. And I don't know if you saw down the right hand side, there was some barrels, and these is another piece of cargo that you get on the Charlwood. I'm not 100% certain what they contained, but it might be some sort of clay or cement or pitch or something like that. So the actual barrel has rotted away. It would have been wooden and iron, and what you are left with is the contents. So you can still see the barrel shape, and there's actually loads of them all over the Charlwood. The more eagle-eyed of you may have seen some earlier on in the video. So I'm up on top of the wreck now. You can probably see that, and I'm heading from the stern back towards the bow, which is roughly where the shot is. You can see that it was quite close to it when we started the dive. And doing this just gives you a feel for the amount of glass that there is on this wreck. So basically everything from here to the seabed is either hull or glass. And we're about 3 or 4 meters above the bottom. It's absolutely incredible. The amount of cargo that this vessel was carrying. More of those barrels on the right, hopefully you saw that. And I think probably the weight of this cargo explains how come the Charlwood foundered so quickly. You remember that's why so many people died. They hadn't got the lifeboat in the water. They were just in the process of lowering it. Oh yeah, there's a load more barrels there. You can see rows and rows of them. So they were trying to get the lifeboat in the water, and then all of a sudden the ship went down, and that's why everyone ended up in the water and everybody very sadly drowned. One of the interesting things that came out of the Board of Inquiry was actually, although there were life jackets on board the Charlwood and there was enough for everybody on board, the crew, or the surviving crew anyway, didn't know where they were. So I have to say I find that pretty unbelievable. How come the captain of the ship, when his ship had been hit and was holed, how come he didn't get his own family into life jackets and, as part of getting on board the boat? He must have had his reasons. I don't know what they were, but it is absolutely mind-boggling to me that that wasn't pretty much the first thing he did. Also why in an era when sailing ships and ships generally went down quite often, why hadn't they gone through these drills? Why didn't everybody know where all this safety stuff was? Just absolutely mind-boggling. We'll never know the answer, of course we won't. But it is one of those things that came up at the Board of Trade inquiry, and you kind of hope lessons were learned, and in the other ships got the message, and other ships made sure that people knew where life jackets were and people knew how to put them on, and in the event of an incident they were able to do that. Oh look, this diver's just come over here to me, and they're very proud. Obviously they found a lovely decanter. There's 3 different types of decanter I think that have come off the Charlwood, and this is the kind of onion one, so-called, because it has got that round sort of semi-onion shape, I guess. What you may have seen is that the diver's given it to me, and if you've had a look you can see that it's actually chipped on the rim of it, so it's not particularly great, which is why I've left it down there, and somebody who fancies a chipped one no doubt will go down there and find it in the future, and they'll be very happy with it, and hopefully they'll find a stopper for it. So the Paralenz camera that I use to record these videos actually stores the videos rather than as a single file. It stores them as lots of small files. Now sometimes what happens, and I don't know why, is I sometimes end up losing one of those videos, and they're about 10 minutes long. So somehow I've managed to lose a 10-minute segment of this dive. I've got the file on my hard disk, but it's 0 kilobytes, so there's nothing in it. So really irritatingly, this dive is going to come to a very abrupt end, or the bit on the wreck is anyway. So I'm really sorry about that. So you're not going to see me taking my strobe off the shot. You're not going to see me, or the first part of the ascent up the shot line. So I'm really sorry about that. It's just one of those things. I've got much better at doing this, but for this particular dive, I'm afraid there's a chunk of it missing. So I'm really sorry about that. And on that note, we then leap to most of the way back up the shot line. You can see I'm ascending up there. The water's got a lot lighter and clearer. And there you go, there's the lazy shot. You can also see by the looks of things, the current is starting to pick up a bit as well. So there's quite a decent amount of tension on the lazy shot. There'll be a few more divers up a bit further on. I've just taken my tag off. There's Andy coming up behind me. So he's gonna come up, he's gonna grab his tag, and then we're the last 2 divers on the line, and we're going to pull it, and then we're going to drift off in the current. And if you've not seen my lazy shot video, you don't understand how this works, there's one of these card things up in the top right of your screen. You go and have a click on it and you can see it. But this is how it should work. Andy's taken his tag off, Andy's released the lazy shot, and you can see there we are drifting off into the current, and we've probably got about another hour or so of deco and when we'll get picked up on the boat. So I know people like looking at my deco profile, so this is the deco profile for the dive. You see me, that's putting the lazy shot there, obviously getting to the bottom about 61 metres. You see me travelling along the bottom there. Then this bit here is where I come up along the top of the wreck with all those plates of glass. Then this is obviously coming back up, coming up to shot. If you have a look at the TTS, about 67, 68 minutes when I leave the bottom. It goes to about 62 there, so that must have been where I changed my PO2 to 1.5. Then hit my first deco stop at 20-ish metres. And then you can see there, just carrying on through the rest of my deco profile and get to the end of the dive. Total run time, 1 hour 50 minutes, so just under 2 hours. Nice duration with, you know, good nearly 40 odd minutes on the bottom. So all very nice. This is obviously the end of the dive. We don't have a trapeze on this dive, so once a lazy shot is released, people put up delayed SMBs and then just stay close to the lazy. Everyone's got their own delayed SMB, and here I am just coming up at the end of the dive. You can see the water's lovely and blue now, almost no snot in it. The snot's all down deeper, which is where we like it to be. And it's obviously a great feeling when you get here. You can see there my deco is just about to be cleared, and then I'm going to be hitting the surface and finding out what the dive's got in store for us. You might have just noticed there's a bag floating there. That's obviously got my Kindle in it. So I've been reading the Kindle during the dive. During the decompression, and that obviously helps the whole thing go a lot faster. Water temperature there, you can see 10 degrees, so this is early season for us. 10 degrees on deco stops, relatively chilly, but there's the surface. It's a little bit lumpy on the top, but not too bad. Having a good look around, and hopefully somewhere over there is going to be Danny in red alert, ready to come pick us up. Oh, there's probably Andy on the lazy shot. He saw his delayed SMB there. Danny's quite a way away, so he's probably picking up some divers over there, giving him the okay signal. And that's the end of today's dive. This is my personal collection of stuff off the Charlwood. As you can see, there's a few nice little bits and pieces there, but all of them have got that kind of blight created by salt in the glass. But as always, I hope you've enjoyed my video. Please like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends, and most of all, please watch another one. Okay. Thank you very much.